Hello, everyone. Thanks, Dave, and everyone for joining. Of course, there's an update when I'm presenting. There we go. All right. So I'm Fawaz. I'm Head of Infrastructure at Canva. My journey at Canva started around 4 years ago with and I'm going to talk about lessons in driving culture change through platform engineering, which is essentially in the next 25, 30 minutes, I'm going to try and summarize the last 4 years of the journey we've been on, what we've tried, and sort of some learnings out of that. So let's start. I love to start with definitions. So we'll start with what is infrastructure. And if for folks outside this room, the person on the street, they will give you that picture. Things that are traditionally something like this, static, inflexible, rarely changing artifacts that take a long time to build. They're very expensive. And most people don't notice them until they don't work, like the light rail this morning, which made me walk from Central instead of jumping on it. And while our modern cloud infrastructure stacks look a bit more like this and a lot more flexible, the complexity of our architectures and the distributed model in which our software now works means that some of those difficulties are starting to creep back in. And organizations in particular in how to hold the cloud are still learning and still evolving in their journeys, as we've been hearing about all morning. So this is, or was, infrastructure in 2020 when I started. The org was very nascent. There was a few teams, there's a few more in there, but I picked up the 4 from memory. Really great people knowing the technologies, knowing how to build all the various things, but very much being order takers. And reacting to the needs of the business, being very tactical and like, oh, we need this type of database, let's go figure out how. That particular piece of infrastructure isn't scaling, let's go figure out how. And what I'm going to try and summarize next is to sort of go, okay, over the last 4 years, how have we evolved that sort of very reactive tactical nature and a little bit pivoted towards thinking about products and platforms and some of the things that we did in the organization to enable that. All right, another definition, platforms. We should sort of align on what that is, and there's many definitions flowing around. I'm a fan of this one by Martin Fowler and Evan Butcher there. A platform is foundation of self-service APIs, tool services, knowledge, and support, which are arranged as a compelling internal product. Highlight on the product there. So yeah, let's dive into it. What did we do? Here's what we did. The very first thing, build empowered teams. And what do we mean by that? The empowerment comes from the fact that the team owns the problem domain. Not the solution, not the tool, but the problem domain. We are on GitHub, we use them a lot, but tomorrow it might be something else. 5 years from now, it may be something else entirely. But the team that looks after source control needs to be wholly in charge of that problem domain, not necessarily solutions. Now, with that, I thought I'd put it in there, but it's too dated. The Spotify matrix, if you remember that, about alignment and autonomy, we talk a lot about that in our teams of aligned on purpose and what they're trying to achieve, with the autonomy on how to go forth and deliver on that. We talk a lot about the third one at Canva in our teams around accountability that underpins all of that. That unless you are accountable for the results and we're holding you to those results, then a lot of the top two don't really matter. So we've come with this definition, empower teams. What did they do? They build great products that solve user problems while satisfying stakeholder requirements. It is very important to know the difference between the two. Who are your stakeholders and who are your users? But before that, or as we break down that definition, let's talk about product. So it's something that solves a problem for your users. They're the key people here. And something that provides value to them. But last but not least, it's something that also meets the stakeholders' needs. So again, users and stakeholders. Users are the folks who depend on the outputs of your work and you're solving problems for them. They're utilizing the things you build. And your stakeholders, they hold a certain influence and need some of the capabilities that we're going to build and want to influence the characteristics and attributes of how we go about doing that. As an example there, so users, they want to see a reduction in the time required to safely deploy to production. Like, how fast can I get my change from idea to the customer's hands? While stakeholders have a view on, wait, how do we do that securely? Well, signed containers are the only things that are able to be deployed. So we've talked about product, we've talked about users, we've talked about stakeholders, but those empowered teams, do they know where they're going, and how do they do that? And for that, you need a very clear vision. One thing we found as we were trying to build that vision is engineers in particular, and very engineering-focused teams, love the current tools and technologies they're using. They only will have that frame of reference. And that gets very hard to decouple from that and go, now let's talk about 3 years, 5 years in the future. What would amazing look like here? And that's what we tried, and it took a long process, but we got there and trying to build that clear vision of we need to be informed by the current challenges and the current tooling, but not be constrained by it and look really further ahead. While doing that, we also need to be very clear on defining the successes of those teams. Now, Canva, as folks would know, I'm assuming, is a very product-led business, and it has an amazing product which found product market fit at the right time and is fantastic at that. And yet, our internal product teams, their measures of success will not be the same measures that our product teams use. So we're not going to measure internal products by revenue or users or monthly active users or anything like that. We need to own our own successes and what that means and define that and be very clear about communicating that to the rest of the business. So you've got your metrics, but I like this question which I asked our teams: if a metric changes on the dashboard as no one is there around to feel it or look at it, does it really make a difference? And the answer is really, not really, it doesn't, because, and I've set this challenge to a lot of the teams that I talk to and a lot of the leaders in my team that, yes, your dashboard looks great, but what are the users feeling? Like, we may have reduced the time to deploy or reduced the CI time, but for authentication, as an example, our engineers are having to touch the UB key like 30 times during that flow. That is not a great experience. So what we've learned is that you need both the qualitative metrics of, yes, numbers on a dashboard of how long things take, but also a qualitative feedback through surveys, through engagements with our product managers, with the users, to really understand what are the challenges and where the areas of friction still exist. So we're trying to do all that. We have a vision. We're building new things. We're trying to improve capabilities. But again, can you change an engine mid-flight of an airplane? Not really. Not without having a bunch of grumpy passengers because they don't like what you've done. You've introduced turbulence. So what we talk a lot about is where are we investing our time. That is a guardrail. Do not take that as gospel. Every organization is different, but that's what we've found in terms of balancing where we invest and we call that our platform pie of where we put the work in. So about 40% is building new capabilities, about 40% is improving the existing ones, making sure the toolings that people are using today are being maintained and being improved, and then KTLO is that 20% bucket, which we always take off the top. All right, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Now, we've talked about all of those things. It's a great movie, but a very terrible platform strategy. Because what tends to happen if we follow all the stuff that we've talked about is you end up creating bottlenecks. And that is not what platforms is about. Platform should be an enablement function with empowered teams, solving and innovating for our users, reducing their cognitive load, and by building great products with clear measures of success. That is the future that we want to see, where platforms is really enabling teams. And I always tend to talk too fast, so I'm realizing I'm near the end of my slides. But that's fine, because we're at lunch, which is great. So this is the balance in how we've actually talked about and think about our empowerment and enablement, which is that 80% will be the paved roads, which is the stock standard way, and we've heard from Ahmad and others in the morning about templates, and that's what we've built. Of if you want to start up a new Java backend service that has a standard database and so on, you can do that in a few clicks, and you'll be off to the races. So make the complex things simple is a Canva value, but I also like to make the impossible probable, and hopefully we're doing that. The 15% are your extension points of like, oh, I want to go off, I have a standard Java backend service, but I want to try out this new database. Sure, we'll allow you to do that, we'll enable you to do the add-ons. And last 5% are the new frontiers, or the wild, wild west, I like to call it. We'll underpin and we'll give you the guardrails that are secure so you can't shoot yourself in the foot. But beyond that, as an example, provisioning an AWS account with all the right things, You own it, you build it, you break it, and you buy it, right? It's completely out of warranty, and you will go do that. Now, what we've found over the last 4 years is allowing people and empowering to do those things to the right side has created platform capabilities that eventually we adopt and bring into the left side, into the 80%. Because they've figured out the rough edges, there's more uses across the business that come up, and we pull those in. So infrastructure in 2020 looked like this. Today, it looks a bit more like this. So we have 4 platform orgs underneath that. The various leads are there. Data, cloud, developed platform, and reliability. And we love to say at Canva that we're only 1% of the way there. And we are only 1% of the way there. We are improving our platforms all the time, improving the capabilities. And my dream, at least at Canva, that I like to say internally, and I'll share with you folks, is that I want our platforms to run ahead of the business. We've gone from being order takers to servicing the business as it is. I would love for us to be in a position, and we're on the way there, to unlock new capabilities that then informs the product to go, hey, did you know this was possible? And we've seen some of those things come to fruition with the Gen AI and everything over the last couple of years coming out. This allowed us to pivot relatively quickly. Yes, there's no such thing as zero work involved. There was always work involved. But there was a much lower lift than we otherwise would have done had this all happened in early 2020, as an example. Now, if you've heard Canva in the news, and at the end of I won't end with a wrap, so don't worry about that. But what I will end with is a little bit of hype video on all the things that we've done over the last 4 years and how they've come to fruition. So thank you for listening. I always end up talking too fast, so I haven't taken up much of your time. But hopefully that leaves you free for lunch. And with that, over to this. It goes on and on.